Certainly want to thank the elders for giving me this opportunity to teach this class. It's been a while since I have taught. It used to be that I taught on a regular basis, and now you have to get back in the saddle occasionally, and it's a little bit different when you come up here. I know we're all aware of the things that have taken place or in the world situation, and certainly we want to be mindful of that and prayerful of that. And of what's going on and the circumstances that may involve, our military in the future. And we certainly want to continue to pray for our military always. They do a great service to our nation. Basically it's about 1% of the people in the United States that are impacted by the military. Most people don't have any affiliation with anybody that's even in the military. If you go around and you say, I don't have anybody. You have anybody? No. Our family has kind of been impacted here just recently because Kerry, after all these years, has been activated again. At the age of 44, he has been activated, and he actually leaves to go to Fort Hood on Friday or Saturday, for I think a 7-month deployment in Texas. So continue to pray for him as well. Several weeks ago, it was Memorial Day, and I was, I'm a big news junkie, but it just so happened that on those particular holidays, any particular one, the main people that will be on the TV on any given slot on the nighttime newscast will take off, and so a lot of times they'll have different things that will come on to kind of be a filler for that. And so I was scanning through the different news channels, and lo and behold, I came across an interview of David Frost, who the oldest of the old of us will even know who David Frost was, but he was an interviewer from England, and he eventually had a show here in the United States, but he would interview different people for 30-minute segments. And this was a 30-minute interview with George Harrison and John Lennon. And I thought, well, these are the people from my youth, so I'm interested in hearing what they had to say. So anyway, I start watching it. I was a minute or so into it before I turned it on. And so they are talking about the fact that just 6 weeks prior to this interview, these two guys had switched from their lifestyle that they had lived all their life to transcendental meditation under, I think it was Ravi Shankar, who I think was their spiritual guide or whatever. And I was really fascinated as he was asking the different questions about what had caused this transition. They mentioned that they had gone through drugs and used every kind of drug and used it to the point where it really had no more impact on their life and this and that. But they started speaking to George Harrison, and they said, tell us about, what has gone on in your life. And he said, let me just tell you how I got to this point in my life. He said, I come from a pretty poor background, and he said, I always wanted and wanted and wanted. And this is a paraphrase. This is not an exact quote, so I'm just going to tell you basically what he said. But anyway, we didn't have a whole lot, and he said we accumulated more and more, and our success became greater and greater. And if you'll remember that John Lennon even had a famous quote. He said, we are more famous. Does anybody remember who they were more famous than? Who? Jesus. We're more popular than Jesus. If you go to the far reaches of the world, people may not know who Jesus is, but they know who we are. But George Harrison said, I accumulated more and more and more, and I found no happiness whatsoever. He said my life was just nothing but just sadness. And so David Frost interjected, and he said, let me ask this question. He said, what if you could do it all over again? What would be different? And he kind of paused for a minute. He had kind of a smile on his face, and he said, what would really have been the best for me? If I'd never accumulated anything. Because he said, I think I was happier then than I am now. And I thought, if only he had read the book of Ecclesiastes before he ever started as a Beatle, he would have seen that Solomon did this experiment way long before he did. And, it was really sad to watch a guy that had accumulated so much realize that with all that accumulation, his life was meaningless. And so anyway, I thought that was a fascinating thing. It has nothing to do with our lesson, but I don't get a chance to discuss these kind of things very often. And so I just thought that I would mention that because it had an unbelievable impact on me. I went to bed thinking about that, thinking that we spend our whole life chasing after wealth and accumulation and houses and cars and, bank accounts and everything else. He had chased through all that and realized when he got to the end and he had all that he could ever want, that it meant nothing to him, that his life had no meaning whatsoever. All right, if you would, open your Bibles up to Psalm 122, and we're going to look at verse 1 today. And this is another verse in my series of Let Us. The last couple of times maybe that I've taught class, I have found verses that emphasize the phrase, let us. In Psalm 122 and verse 1 says this right here. I was glad when they said unto me, let us go into the house of the Lord. I was glad. Here we see David, and this is actually talking about coming into Jerusalem itself. If you go back to Psalm 120 and read Psalm 120, it is just the most depressing thing that you can read. I mean, it talks about his sadness and how the sadness had overcome him. And we spring ahead just 2 chapters later, and in Psalm 122, we see he said, well, I was glad when they said unto me, let us go into the house of the Lord. What we want to talk about today is how happy are you and how excited are you when you have an opportunity to come to the worship service, to the Bible class? What about your enthusiasm? I wrote these questions down, and I want us all to think about these questions together. Do you start thinking each Saturday of how lucky you are to be a child of God and have an opportunity to worship Him? It used to be that on Saturday, everybody got ready for worship on Sunday. I can remember us as kids laying our clothes out, polishing our shoes, preparing our Bible lesson. We had a book at that time, and, you'd have 3 or 4 pages and a few questions. And, I was 12, 13, 14, whatever the age. And I would sit there, and we would go through the questions and answer them because I didn't want to be the one guy that showed up in the Bible class that was unprepared, not prepared for the Bible class. And so, do you start thinking on Saturday about the worship on Sunday and get mentally prepared for what we're about to do? We're about to go into the presence of God Himself and worship Him. Can you imagine what it would be like if suddenly an invitation comes in the mail to us or a phone call happens and we get notified that the president requests our presence at a certain function? Okay, whether you're Democrat, Republican, it makes no difference. It could be either president or any of them. And there's going to be 30 or 40 people there. Do you think that you'd get up 30 minutes before you were supposed to be there and start trying to get ready? Do you think you'd be on time? Do you think that you'd mentally start thinking about this days in advance? What am I going to wear? What are my shoes? Are my shoes going to match this? Is this going to take? Is the car gassed up? Do we have this? Are we ready to go? David said, I was glad. He had a mental state that prepared him for what was going to take place as far as his worship to God Himself. What's the question again? Do you start thinking each Saturday of how lucky you are to be a child of God? You think about how lucky we are today. We have the hope of eternal salvation. You realize that of the 8 billion plus people in the world, the vast, vast majority of them will find themselves in the same situation that the rich man was in Luke chapter 16. I'm tormented in this flame. We are so lucky. We are so lucky among all the people in the world that we have the hope of eternal salvation. Do you make plans to arise early so that you can arrive on time for Bible class? Bible class starts at 9. We start at 9:04, 9:06. Bible class. When we leave here on Wednesday night at 8:10 or 8:15, we have 3.5 days to make preparation for our arrival here at 9 o'clock in the morning. Okay? When I worked at the railroad, there was a foreman. Okay, he was a World War II veteran. He was a Korean War veteran, and he had started at the railroad in the mid-30s. Okay, so he had continuous time because they count the wartime as continuous time at the railroad. So he had been there 40-something years. I don't know however long it was. When you went to work, he stood by the time clock. There wasn't late. You were either on time or you were off. If you came in 1 minute past time, we don't need you. You can go home. I started getting to the point where I got there 25 or 30 minutes early because I wanted to make sure I couldn't afford not to get a paycheck. I mentally prepared myself every day so that I left at about 11:10 or so at night. Okay, midnight, going on midnight, so that I would be there by 11:30, 11:45. I would be there way early, okay? Because he said, we can't wait on you, okay? We can't wait on you. If you can't be here on time, we don't need you, okay? Mentally, we should make a preparation in our minds that we know exactly what time we are going to be there, and we know exactly what time it starts, and actually, from just a personal standpoint, being here early, so that if somebody needs something, okay? What did David say? I was glad. Anytime we're glad and excited about something, we sure aren't going to drag around and say, well, I think I'll worry about getting there a little bit later. If we have that attitude of excitement and enthusiasm, man, we can't wait to get there. I'm going to have a point about that. It may be one more point away. Do you make plans to arise early so that you can arrive on time for Bible class? Are you ready to tear the doors down to get in? I've mentioned this before. Our attitude ought to be one, not that there's anything special with the building. There's nothing special about this building. But there is something special about the people that are in it and what's taking place in it. And we ought to have the attitude that when I get here, if the doors are locked, I'm tearing the doors down. I can't wait to get in. I can remember at Christmas time years ago when I had my kids, we'd shut the hall door and we'd have all their stuff laid out. And when they got up, guess what kind of attitude they had? They would almost tear that hall door down trying to get in that room to see what all they had. They couldn't wait to get in. Brethren, we need to work on this, on our mental approach to what our worship actually is. And we need to be excited and enthusiastic, so much so that we can't wait to get there. We cannot wait to be a part of what's going on. Have you studied your lesson? We know in here what the lessons are going to be. Okay, we have the sheets handed out for the Wednesday night. We have we follow along in 2 Corinthians. We know what verses we're on and so forth. Everybody in here, there should be no, you can say, well, I forgot the verse, or I did this, or I forgot that. You know what? You can call if you're not sure what the verses are. You know what makes a good Bible class great, or a great Bible class even greater? When everybody has come with the attitude of David, I was glad, and they say, well, look, I studied 1 Corinthians chapter 2 last night. I'm ready for Bible class. But just in case, I studied 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. In case we go real fast, I'm going to be ready if we get to chapter 8. Brethren, this is the book of life here. This is our roadmap to where? Eternal life. Not this. Hold on. and not this. I'm sorry. This is the road map to the other place. Okay, don't pay attention to that. That's the worst one. This is our Bible right here. This is mine right here. Okay, this is the road map. We should be excited to study. Paul told Timothy to study. That requires effort. Somebody said, well, I'm not sure I know how to study. You know what? Sit down, ask somebody. Teach me how to study. People ask Jesus, what did they ask him? Teach us how to what? Pray. Teach us how to pray. Can you teach us how to pray? You know what? Sometimes maybe we need to have a lesson on how to study. Accumulate all the information on any particular topic and come to conclusions based on that information. I can remember when I taught a high school class at Berkeley, and we had about 10 or 12 people, and something came up about baptism. I said, we're going to study baptism. I didn't realize what all real study was. I said, you go home and you get every verse you can find on baptism. Every verse, Old Testament, New Testament, any location. And so we had all these chalkboards in there, and we started writing the verses down on baptism. Here, and then we started bunching them up into different things. I said, we're going to find out if the church is teaching us the right thing or not. Have we been taught wrong all these years? We're going to come to our own understanding. We're going to do like the Bereans, thank you, in Acts 17:11. They searched the Scriptures daily whether the things were so. And this study took 3 months. Because after we got all the verses up there, we had to categorize them and then subcategorize them and then do this. And you know what the conclusion was? That somebody has to be baptized. Baptism is an immersion. Baptism washes away sins. You have to be a believer to be a candidate to be baptized. All this information was there. They had hardly ever even looked at all this information. And guess who else hadn't? Some of this stuff I didn't even know. Okay? Do you engage others? We come in and sit down and don't talk to anybody, don't speak to anybody, don't ask how you're doing, what's going on, how's your life going, anything I can do to help. We're going to address some of this as we move forward. Brethren, this is an attitude that we need to really work on, okay? There's nothing wrong. Certainly the Pentecostals and people like that teach gross error. But one thing that I do like about them is that they do show a certain enthusiasm for what they do. You know what I'm saying? They always seem to be very enthusiastic, okay? That doesn't mean that I want us to start clapping, certainly not. That doesn't mean that I want us to start hollering, certainly not. But when we come in those doors, we should be excited to be here and glad to be here and enthusiastic about being here. Happy that this is part of our roadmap to get us to heaven. I wrote this sentence down. This is kind of a compilation of several things that I read in the couple of different sources that I use. Sadly, congregations have allowed our adversary, the devil, to cause disunity of spirit. And this has led many to be weak and neglectful toward their service to the Lord and to their brethren. We should have, when we sit down and we have our attendance, if we have 65 or 70 members, I don't know how many we have. We've got some that are going to be sick and some that are going to be out of town. But the number ought to be, if we have 70 in Bible class, we ought to have 70 in the worship and 70 on Wednesday night. The numbers should all be the same because everybody should be here when the doors are open. Let's look at Hebrews 10, verses 24 and 25. And this is a verse we're very familiar with, and we're going to make some points off of this. And I believe this is Paul that wrote this. There's some debate over who wrote the book of Hebrews. It really doesn't matter, okay? Let us, here's another one of these let us verses, okay? Let us consider one another to provoke unto love and to good works, not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together as the manner of some is. You know what this tells me right here? And this tells us. that all the way back 2,000 years, 30 to 40 years after the death of Jesus himself, already weakness in the church was starting to show up. Because the Hebrew writer finds opportunity to address this particular problem with the Hebrew Christians he's writing to. Not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together, as the manner of some is, but exhorting one another, and so much the more as you see the day approaching. Brethren, I'm not much of a cartoon reader. I never collected comic books or anything like that. I never watched or read that many comic strips, but I know that when you read a comic and you see the circles above their head, that means they're thinking something. Okay, I've mentioned this before. That means they're thinking something. But if it's a line coming out of their mouth that goes up to the circle, that means they're speaking something. Here's what we know as we assemble here this morning among this particular group of people. If we could see the circles above all of our heads, and we could see the big circle, which is what they're thinking, what would we be thinking? I'm worried about my job. I'm worried about my health. I'm worried about my family. I'm worried about my kids. I'm worried about this situation. I'm worried that I may not have enough money to pay this particular bill. What am I going to do about this? The reason that he addresses this particular thing is because the Hebrew writer, knew just back then as it is now that people that come to worship service come sometimes with great concerns in their life. And the Hebrew writer says, don't forsake the assembling of ourselves together as the manner of some is, but exhorting one another, and so much the more as you see the day approaching. There's some debate about what the day is. It's certainly not the end of times, because we don't have any signs indicating what the end of times are going to be, so we wouldn't know that the day's approaching. Some people speculate that this may have been the attack that was going to take place at some point in the future on Jerusalem and so forth. But anyway, here's the point, brethren. Okay, I'll get you in just a second. We are told to exhort and encourage one another. Exhort is to basically encourage. I didn't even look up the definition of exhort. Shame on me. I should have. But I know it when I see it. Okay? We don't forsake the assembling of ourselves together, but we exhort one another. I've always said this. I guess this is one of my proverbs. Okay, I have two proverbs. Okay, in dealing with kids, my famous proverb: sit down and shut up. Okay, that's what when you have kids. That was my proverb. The other one, in dealing with this particular issue right here, is, man, I done lost my train of thought. Can you believe that? The greatest point I was ever going to make, and I forgot it. I'll think of it in just a second. But anyway, Aaron, go ahead. Then I'll. Mm-hmm.
So when understanding that, I was like, well, man, there's no wonder that they're fearing this assembly. They might not be going because they're like, I don't want to be caught, I don't want to be killed. And this passage is saying, regardless of that, you should not forsake the assembly, because it's more important for you guys to be together and exhort. Exhorting is an uplifting kind of encouragement.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
That, and I know what I was going to say Everybody that becomes unfaithful has one thing in common. They all have one thing in common. Those that drift out and eventually disappear altogether is they all had their last day in the worship service. They all have a last day. And we think, is there something that we could have said that could have encouraged them to stay? Did we make an effort? Sometimes we have people that come and disappear from the congregation here, and somebody will say something, and I will say, guess what I say? I'd forgot about them. They've been gone so long now, I haven't thought about them. Okay, I haven't really thought about them like I should. Brethren, our deal is that we offer a shoulder to everybody. Our attitude is, come on, it's tough, but we're going to make it. We're going to do what we can. We're going to do all that we can. I showed Bruce this, and I don't know if I've ever mentioned this in here or not, but this is a video that you can find on YouTube of an Olympic runner from the 80s that he was the gold medal. He was expected to win the gold medal and favored by a lot. And I mean, you win a gold medal. I mean, I think the United States gives you $1 million or $2 million or whatever, some huge amount if you win a gold medal. And then you get all kind of perks, like you get people that want you to advertise their product and so forth. Well, boom, the gun went off, and it was a 400-meter sprint, which is one lap around the track, and he takes off, runs about the first 50 or 60 yards, and pulls up with a hamstring injury. Okay? And this guy was so determined to get to the finish line that he just starts hopping. Okay? He's practiced all this time to get there. He's worked hard to get there. Now he's got this discouragement that has been laid on him. But he's trying not to give up. But he is really wobbling. And all of a sudden, I mean, look this up on YouTube. This is unbelievable to even watch this. You see this commotion. This would never happen today, by the way. It never happened today. But in the 80s, it was still able to happen. You see this commotion over on the sidelines. And you can see it on the video. Like people are fighting and pushing and shoving. And coming through the crowd, this guy comes through. It's his daddy. His daddy, who puts his arm underneath him, and they go together to the finish line. That's the attitude we need to have, brethren. What did David say? I was glad when they said unto me, let us go into the house of the Lord. The Greek word for assembling means a gathering together. The command here is to meet together for the worship of God, and this responsibility is placed on every Christian to do it. Every Christian has this responsibility. Nobody gets a waiver on this. If you're baptized into Christ, you have this responsibility. It is implied that there is blame or fault wherever there is neglect. When we choose not to come, when we make a conscious effort not to come, it is implied that there is blame or fault there. There's going to be a problem. We are going to have to answer for our lack of diligence in this area if we make a conscious effort not to be there. We're commanded not to forsake the assembling of ourselves together. We're commanded to exhort each other. Do not forsake the assembling. Here's the two commands. Don't forsake the assembling, and do exhort. We're responsible for both of them. Age has there's no disqualifications. There's no reason that somebody is excused. Somebody says, well, I'm an older member, and I don't feel like going over to this person and exhorting them and encouraging them and asking them how they're doing. A younger person says, I'm embarrassed. I don't know that I can go and do that, okay? There's no excuse here. We're all encouraged to do this. It's not easy for some people to do this. I understand that. I'll get you just a second, Greg. Thank you. It's not easy for some people to do this. But in order for us to be a strong body, everybody takes on the job of encouraging the other person. Come on, we're going to do it. I'm sorry that you have this. Is there something we can do to help you? You know, I'm going to mention one person in particular here because I've mentioned this in my other Bible class. I'll mention it when I taught on Wednesday night down there. But I'm going to mention this again because I think that this person is, you know, and he probably don't have any idea that I'm going to recognize him. But Maury, I appreciate Maury because Maury is a guy that goes around and he talks to other people. And he spends time with our senior members, and he will talk to them and encourage them. He will talk to them in the parking lot, okay? He will talk to them in here. You know, I'm a keen observer of people because I've just always been something that if I can add something from into my quiver from somebody else, I'm going to do it. So I'm always looking around, what's going on. And see, one thing I like about the way he approaches it, he sits down with them and talks to them face to face on the pew and stuff like that. And you know, there's sometimes the people that you speak to sometimes, let's say in the worship, we're here for worship or whatever, and you're out there, and they say, "How are you doing?" And you say, "Well, you know, my wife is sick, I lost my job, I've got a leak in my roof, and my car broke down." And they say, "Man, that is great." They're not paying a bit of attention. They just ask, "How are you doing?" because that's the pat phrase that you're supposed to ask. But he acts like he cares. He acts like, and I want to be like that. He acts like he's trying to encourage these people. Come on, we're going to do it. Greg, go ahead. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The joy that's there versus all the other noise that is going on in our lives or in society that pulls us another way. Is this a time of refreshing for us and building our faith up and us be able to build others' faith up? And I just saw it so much in both of our parents' lives as they valued it so much.
My mother mentioned that about how much she missed being in the worship service. You know, I've covered one page of my notes here. I got 4 more. So you're going to get part 2, I guess, the next time Bruce goes on vacation. All right. If we don't assemble for Bible class, for worship service, guess what? We can't obey the command to exhort one another. We can't obey this. Failure to assemble is an act of direct disobedience to God's commands. Failure to be here. Some people say, and I'm going to make this point, some people say, well, nothing in the Bible class. Don't have to go to Bible class. Don't have to be there. It's not a command. How does the Bible address that? Obey those that have the rule over you, the elders. The elders have set this time aside. Who in the world would argue about coming to Bible class? Who in the world would say that in their soul, who could say this? I don't need any more Bible teaching. I don't need any more. I'm getting my 2 hours a week plus Wednesday night. That's all I need. I don't need any more. The elders have set this time aside so that we can be fed, that we can feast on the Word. Now, sometimes, it's hard. I understand. It's not easy to commit 5 or 6 hours on Sunday to be here. We get here at 8:45 and we leave here at 1:15. That's a long day. But if our attitude is kind of directed in the right direction, as David's was, good things are going to happen. See, here's some that already started the practice of forsaking. We mentioned that. Very dangerous for the individual or a congregation when we have people that take attendance in such a haphazard way. They're not there to exhort. You may be the one that is responsible for saving somebody's soul on Judgment Day by the encouragement you give them in here. We experienced a tragedy last June the 10th when Larry died. And I've often thought, could any of us have said anything else? I really don't think so. But I've wondered it. Could we have been the one to have gotten him to have delayed this a day or so, or a week, or 2 weeks, or forever? Could we have been the one that could have done that? That's what we've got to make sure of, brethren, that we're there to exhort and encourage each other. Just real briefly here, we talk about these being commandments. Anybody ever looked up how many commandments are in the New Testament? Sandra, have you ever looked that up? I was curious about this. I said, how many? These are 2 commandments. Don't forsake the assembling and exhort one another. These are 2 commandments right here. How many are listed in the New Testament? I Googled this. I've done this several times, but I Googled it again last night. One guy says 8,000 commandments in the New Testament. Most people don't say that many, okay? One guy's consensus is there's about 1,000 of them, okay? One guy says there's 400 and something that Jesus said. Some of them are so, they're buried into the sentence, you really don't even recognize them as a commandment. But this is just one right here. These are 2 right here, exhort and encourage. Exhort, not forsake, okay? That's something that we need to make sure that we're committed to, brethren. Let me tell you something. Thank you, Greg and Dewey. Dewey walked out before I thanked him. Thank y'all for giving me this opportunity to teach this Bible class. And I want you to always know that when I get up here, I come at this from a spirit of love. I love the people here at Cordova, okay? I know I'm a unique personality, okay? I recognize that. I'm different, okay? Everybody has their own uniqueness. I'm unique, okay? But I want you to always know that I love you guys and I care. And, one of the things that I could get in later on in the thing, and then this lesson will be yours, is that, we should always make sure that the people know that we are praying for you. It says that, there's a point in some of the commentaries that I looked at where it says that the elders should get up. Greg and Dewey, I want you to remember this, okay? You should get up and remind the congregation that you are praying for them, okay? Because people want to know that somebody is praying for me. And I want you to know, brethren, that I pray for you, and I love you, and I appreciate this opportunity. And like I said, maybe over the next 8 to 10 lessons that I get a chance to teach, I'll be able to finish this stuff here. So don't forget what you already heard, because we're going to come right in with the rest of this at some point in the future. Thank y'all for being here.